phenomenal speed and in 1930 became the world's largest and richest gold mining area. Today it is a modern city in every sense. Tall skyscrapers, a complex network of freeways, a bustling metropolis of industry and commerce. Geo Stott became synonymous with iron and steel in South Africa. Beginning in 1911, the company he founded quickly developed the necessary skills and business acumen to bend, beat, roll and form steel into the many different
It's been a wonderful opportunity. I joined Stotts 5 years ago, and I've been in the steel business for just on 30 years. It's been one of the more pleasant experiences, exciting experiences I've ever made through. And just a few highlights of the company. It's been around for the name of the company. Should we change it to reflect the new scenario in South Africa, which a lot of black empowerment companies do, and
The early days, set in what we now call Older Johannesburg, must have been extremely tough and difficult for men who had big plans and dreams of attaining great wealth from the gold that had been discovered quite by accident. It must have been very similar to the Great Gold Rush, to the Klondike in Canada that attracted so many people of similar hopes. For a man like Geo Stott, who can now be seen as a true early Rand pioneer, it was a constant test of his ability to keep the business going and achieving profitability. Fortunately, it was his knowledge to manufacture steel and iron very valuable. It proved to be a source that was in constant demand by miners working with rock that needed to be broken down and then made to give up its gold.
As I've picked up from more particularly George and Ian Stott, that my uncle and father respect, but there was property available in Wema area, and he managed to get with W.F. Johnson, the big timber merchants. They were next door of Joburg, and they had a tough time of it, but they managed to keep going, and with the advent of help from David, really, who put in capital, they managed to get hold of a mill that was standing on the wharf at Durban. Had been sent out from Europe, or from, I think it was an American design, came out to somebody who couldn't pay for it, and they bought that mill and put it in 1920, and that was the start of the rolling. Prior to that, it was all blacksmith products.
All the year, I think at present the longest service.
The proximity of the works to the busy Elof Street extension is well illustrated here. The smokestack can be seen below the old Topstar Drive-In and across from the Ericsson Ford showrooms. The labour-intensive nature of the work is very evident in these views of the men moving hot billets to the mill, manipulating the bars through the mill and pulling them to the cooling bed for further cooling and loading of steel products.
Coal was the lifeblood of the works, and tremendous tonnages were brought by rail and road transport. Supplies in the winter months often ran low and caused anxious phone calls as to when the next consignment could be expected.
Itself out, and they would work it into a bloom, and then that would go through to the rolling mill, which is in the background. But that shingling process died out long ago because it was actually made up from pieces of metal cut and piled.
The pile had been brought in from the furnace, dripping at about 1450 degrees centigrade. And of course this 3-ton hammer with the steam pressure behind it did a tremendous amount of work, and with one thump on that pile and started to meld it and give you a more homogeneous block, which would then be shaped by the man, the shingler, and that's come to a more of a finished product there prior to cooling on that pile there. It will cool down and then be weighed and set out in the correct position for the rolling mill to use according to weight category. This is all the manhandling that went on of those products from the shingling hammer. This is scrap that was used to make up a pile.
Company being where it was, as the years went by, with all the smoke that was emanating from the chimneys that starts, and the ash and the dirt and everything else, and the noise and the tremor from the hammers going, the big hammers. Evidently, as the city council decided that it was time for us to move, they tried to get, and on closer inspection he realized that the M2 east-west was right over our property. If you look carefully, he saw that Elof Street extension on Stott Street was going to be underneath the motorway. They approached the municipality and they agreed, yes, that was true. They were going to put in a motorway, and unfortunately we would have to move. So that caused great consternation in the family.
In 1967, after we had already moved out, demolishers of the old site were ready to bring down that 50-foot high brick chimney, which had gone up with great pride and joy in 1950. And the mayor came up for the occasion, and the African Mirror newsreel people were there. They closed off Elof Street extension and Stott Street, and all the Wimmer and everything else was closed off to bring this chimney down. Very effective, and dropped it right where they wanted it to be, and there was no damage done in any way at all except the end of the chimney.
in '66 we moved across here piecemeal from the one works to the other. It was amazing the amount. Now suddenly there was room to spare, and that has virtually been the case up until the present. And of course they're using more and more of the space here with all the new developments that are taking place up to the very present.
To pursue this line of business. Ian Stott, in one of his visits to England, saw the presses used in the making of washers, and it was very much in line with what Stotts could tackle. Suitable steel plate was there for the asking. More presses became available when the government mint put the old machines on the market, and these were ideal for washer manufacture. Sizes from 3/16 up to 2-inch diameter hold were made by the ton, from plate varying in thicknesses from 1/16 to 1/4 of an inch. Later, more started to do the same, and it became very competitive. Source of business. The modern mines no longer rely on packs of wood to keep the rock tunnels underground from collapsing on the miners, and special support mechanisms made from steel are now used exclusively in the coal and gold mines. Stotts are one of the companies very active in this modern method of rack support and have supplied a massive amount to. There is a comprehensive workshop and permanently staffed maintenance department to tend to the ongoing and often urgent repairs to machinery. Here we see Fred Peacock, one of the finest artisans on a lathe, working on another turning job. A complete tool and die division was needed to produce the required tools for the press division, and here young Glenn Stott is working on a component.
The previous chairman up on the wall. And here we have George, the founder, who died in 1927. I've actually got a Scottish newspaper here, the Evening Express, dated Tuesday, August 16th, 1927. And there's a story about the death of George Stott, managing director of the firm of Messrs. Geo Stott and Company Engineers, Johannesburg. Put in some capital in that, really. So George had a long association. And then we closed the mill down, and then Brian came in, my late cousin Brian, and he was chairman.
The blacksmiths have constantly supplied many products to engineering companies and the mines over the entire history of Geo Stott and Company. The demand for forged round, flat and hexagon bar has been the backbone of this division. The use of manipulators to lift and turn the hot steel under the hammers made a tremendous difference to the quality and weight of the product. The skill of the blacksmith in charge is invaluable, and this has been a source of worry for the future, as no one wants to do this type of work nowadays. The work is hot and heavy, especially in the summer months, and young men would rather seek employment in the commercial or banking world.
My name is Paul. I've been working in the forging game since 1936. Down there to work as hard as we can.
Was that all done by hand?
It was, it was, yes, from up to about 20 years ago. All the work you see that I'm doing now was done by actual man. I've been there with 35 years, 36 years experience. Johnny is going for 25.
As mentioned earlier, George Stott himself was a blacksmith, and the present forge therefore has embodied in it all the experience handed down the line of succession over a period of 65 years. It is here that a great deal of art is still part of the know-how, blended in more recent years with the growing technical and scientific approach to the production of both simple and highly complex forgings. Individual forgings which are produced range in mass from 5 kilograms up to approximately 8 tons. The production of rolled bar, both flat, round and square, was carried out on a 4-stand merchant mill of Brightside Engineering, produced locally by VCOR of Vanderbijl Park. This was a modern, versatile mill, capable of being changed and set up to roll a new section in 2 hours or less. On a 5-day week, 2 by 8 hour shift basis, this mill could produce up to 2,500 tons per month, depending on the product mix, and in lengths of 12 meter maximum, depending on the section. The billets for hot rolling were supplied by ISCOR from 1934 up to 1970, and until 1965, the old shingling process became a supplier also in 1966, and Highveld Steel in 1968-69. And then, due to supply difficulties, the main source became the Rhodesian Iron and Steel Company. Bars and sections issuing from the finishing stand of the hot mill are guided onto run-out rolls, at the end of which are hot saws, where they are cut to length and then proceed to an extensive cooling table. The bars and sections are moved laterally whilst cooling to a point where they are offloaded and batched prior to dispatch. It was not long before the space that became available was put to good use in the steel construction industry. The lucrative business resulted from Eskom and other large customers.
Stotts has been well known for some very core steel